Hello, YouTube. My name is Colin. Welcome to this channel. Welcome to this video. I am just doing a totally off the cuff, no notes video about why the Wheel of Time TV show on Amazon sucks. And I will keep watching it. I felt compelled to make this video. Not that it's going to gain any traction, not that anybody's going to watch this, but just a way to collect my thoughts and kind of put them out there into the ether. I'm probably not alone in expressing a lot of these views. I've read a few articles, like the most recent episode, I think episode 7, somebody wrote an article praising, the episode. And when I read that article, I was like, did we watch the same episode? This whole season has been a disappointment, just as last season was. And the reason I felt so compelled to make this video is because I'm one of those guys that read these books when I was a kid, as a teenager, and I had extremely high hopes for this TV show. And maybe that's the problem. Maybe our expectations were too high. And I'm going to make a lot of Game of Thrones references because whether you like it or not, that is the best book series we can compare this to. Now, for all the problems with Game of Thrones, obviously, for those of you who know, I read the books as well. For those of you who watched the show, you know how it ended. Nobody liked the ending. Maybe there's a small percentage of people who liked the ending of Game of Thrones TV show, but the books never finished. And a lot of people that did read the books were very disappointed, including myself, with how that TV show ended. Obviously, a huge letdown, a huge disappointment. And I consider myself a self-proclaimed TV show junkie, connoisseur, if you will. I feel like a lot of the best TV shows came from books or movies, right? I mean, a movie made from a book. I feel like you have so much material to work with. You have, all the lines written. You have the setting. You have so much material. It just takes somebody good to come in and portray that on the big screen, right? And I have no experience in directing or acting or anything like that. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I know how to make a good show or have any clue of what goes into creating a show like a Game of Thrones, like a Wheel of Time, or any other number of amazing TV shows. One of my favorite TV shows of all time happens to be The Expanse. Also a book series, happened to be written by two authors who were mentored by George R.R. Martin, who wrote Game of Thrones. And sometimes people refer to The Expanse as Game of Thrones in space. That was also an Amazon TV show. Well, it started on Sci-Fi, got canceled, then ended up, Amazon picked it up again, and really did a good job with it. I think that is one of the best underrated, not talked about shows of all time. However, that's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about why Wheel of Time sucks. And again, I'm just going to jump all over the place. This is not an episode by episode review. Maybe I should do that. I've been thinking about doing that, but I just have to get out a lot of frustrations as a fan, as a fan of fantasy, as a fan of TV shows, as a fan of book series, as somebody who grew up reading these things. Okay. And again, you may say it's not fair to make Game of Thrones comparisons. Maybe they're apples and oranges, but you can't help it. You really can't. Okay, these books were written around the same time in the 90s. I read them around the same time. In fact, if I recall correctly, I liked the Wheel of Time series more than Game of Thrones at the time. I felt like it had more magic, more, I guess that's really the best thing I can come down to. A lot more magic, a lot quicker intro into that world. I think Game of Thrones was a little slow to get into the supernatural, and obviously we knew about the White Walkers, to get started. But there were just so many memorable moments in the Game of Thrones TV show that really just brought to life everything that the books already had. Okay, so let's go to Wheel of Time. What are some frustrations? again, I'm probably not the only person on the internet that's making these observations. And I'm going to just jump all over the place. They're in no particular order, but especially after I just watched last night's episode 7, I believe, I've been thinking about this for a couple weeks because I've been so frustrated. I was so frustrated with season 1. Okay, first of all, let's back up there. Okay, season 1 came out, what, 2 years ago? Um, I had extremely high hopes for this show. And outside of maybe one or two scenes in the entire first season, I can't remember a single thing. There was no memorable, end to that show. I mean, we all remember how season 1 of Game of Thrones ended, or it seemed like every season of Game of Thrones ended on some kind of cliffhanger that made you just so hooked for the next season, right? The two things that come to mind for me in season 1, first of all, were the obviously the Trolloc scene with Moraine and Lan, and the action that that took place in the village, and I can't even remember the name right now. I'm so terrible. Um, that was an awesome scene. I think they did a good job with that. I do have some critiques of the One Power and the Weaves in general. However, the it was good, right? It got you in your feels as a fan. You were like, cool, boom. Now we know what the Aes Sedai are. We know what warders are. We know this shit's real. It was kind of I feel like a somewhat of a callback. Not really, but the Game of Thrones episode 1, we start off immediately beyond the wall, White Walkers, and then we never see them again for whatever, right? The rest of I don't know, till the second season or something. I can't remember, right? So immediately you're hit with this as a fan, as a reader, whatever, and then we go back to like normal life. Nobody believes what's going on beyond the wall, whatever, whatever. It's a similar thing. I feel like kind of these people living in naivety, in peace, not knowing that there's an evil force out there, not really knowing what Trollocs are. It seems like they didn't really do a good job of explaining that or talking about it, but you got that sense from the first episode of season 1. Anyways, and then the second memorable moment I had with season 1 was Logain. That's it. That's all I remember. I mean, I remember the ways. I remember them ending the season. I remember Ishmael. I remember them, the Dark One. I remember Moraine getting stilled and all this stuff. But again, I mean, there was no good end to that season. I don't know what it is about Amazon, because I mean, not to bring up the Lord of the Rings disaster, but their whole prequel is I couldn't even finish watching it, and that's something that never happens with me. Like, I'll start a show, like a show or a movie has to be so bad that I will actually not keep watching it, and I just couldn't handle it anymore with the Amazon show. So, or I'm sorry, with the Amazon Lord of the Rings. So I don't know what's going on with Amazon. I mean, like I said, they did an amazing job with The Expanse. So again, I had high hopes with them for The Wheel of Time. I don't know if it's an HBO Amazon thing, because maybe HBO allows for a more darker, real, the stuff they can show. I mean, I think it's 13 and up for The Wheel of Time, so I don't know if that plays a factor. But again, I'm just jumping all over the place with my thoughts here. So some things that come to mind are just let's talk about the overall aesthetics of the show, right? I mean, high budget. It's not like Amazon is hurting for money. It's not like they can't afford good directors, good actors, good clothing, what have you, whatever you want to call it. But I mean, let's it's it it's hard to put into words. However, some things that come to mind are, it's not how you imagined it as a fan. And I know that's weird because it's subjective and everybody has their own imagination. That's part of the beauty of reading books. You all read a book and you come up with your own images of certain characters in your mind. However, I kind of always just went off the illustrations of the book. That's why I put the book here, and I'll switch it possibly throughout this video. But I mean, let's talk about Lan. I don't know, because that's the first thing that comes to mind when I look at this cover of this book, the first book in the series, right? Lan does not look like Lan. Lan on the show does not look like Lan from the books, in my opinion. It is no affront or offense to the actor. It's just it doesn't fit the image of a I don't know, a knight in shining armor, if you will. I mean, not to say it like that, but I mean, look at this cover. Look at the cover of this book, and tell me, does that guy with the helmet and armor and two swords and a big badass horse look like the guy that we see on the show? And maybe I should bring up a picture of him. Let's do that. He is not. Again, it's not. It's not an offensive thing. I just have to point out that he's not the same sort of feeling of formidability, if you will. Let's look at this, right? There's Lan. Now compare those two. He's wearing cloth and he's got a ninja sword, okay, and a headband and a ponytail. I don't find that intimidating. I don't find that. I mean, yeah, he's a ninja and he's a badass sword fighter, but that doesn't look like the guy that I pictured from the books, or was illustrated to us, or was described in the books. I pictured a big burly man. I pictured a lot of warders that way, as the physical protectors of the Aes Sedai, right? So you're not getting the sense of that from this actor. And now I guess that brings us to the whole, not to get political, but you can tell, kind of like the Lord of the Rings Amazon prequels, there is a little bit of wokeness that has, for lack of a better word, infiltrated the show and who they choose as characters and actors. And this is, again, nothing against diversity or having a variety of backgrounds, and it is absolutely a diverse world and landscape and story, just like Game of Thrones was. I mean, you might make some criticisms that certain characters were whatever, certain races or something like that, but this has nothing to do with race. This has nothing to do with anything. It's not an issue with that. It's just that it's like you build up an image of something in your mind. You have an expectation of how a character is going to be portrayed. I'm sorry, but if you were going to redo The Princess and the Bride today, and you had Andre the Giant cast as, I don't know, the guy who plays Tyrion Lannister in the Game of Thrones show, like, you would not, that wouldn't compute, right? That would not, doesn't process, doesn't, it's not, it's just not that. I don't know how else to say it. I mean, it's really that simple. And the same thing goes for Egwene, and Perrin, I think, is one actor that does kind of fit. I mean, I pictured him a little. Oh no, I'll just say it. I'll just say he's pretty good. I think that's a good cast. The Matt debacle was frustrating. They obviously had an actor playing Matt the first season who disappeared. There was some drama there. Whatever. I kind of liked the Matt from the first season. The second one, whatever. I mean, they did the best they could do. Right? Things happen. Moiraine. Let's talk about Moiraine. That's another one. I pictured her just like this cover of the first season, the first book. Short red hair, um, a lot more polished, if you will, smaller, definitely smaller in stature than Lan. I mean, you can see the contrast here on the book, and they're like the same size. I mean, that goes back to the Lan discussion. But it's really frustrating as a fan. That's all I can say. And the acting, I mean, again, I'm jumping all over the place. The acting is just god awful. I mean, I was thinking about this today. Like, who's like the one character that's like is like a good actor? I would say it's like Ishamael, the Dark One's lieutenant, the strongest Forsaken in the series so far. He's like the only actor that has a sense of sincerity or seriousness to him. he's kind of like I look forward to his lines because at least he's I don't know, he just does a good job of portraying that character, and he doesn't have a lot of lines, but there's a couple cheesy scenes with him and Lanfear, if you will, but like this last season, his scenes with Matt were okay, and again, like this whole show is just not it's just mediocre at best. And like I said, though, I'm going to keep watching. Why? Number one, there's probably a lack of TV shows that I want to watch right now. There's nothing good on. Um, and I'm such a huge fan of the book series because it's something I grew up with. It's near and dear to my heart. I spent a lot of I won't go into it, but there were some interesting times in my life where all I had were these books. I didn't have access to cell phones or technology. I was in a place in my life where my solace, my refuge, my creative my getaway, my escape were these books. Same with the Game of Thrones books. I was so excited when my mom, uh, or when I would have somebody, I would be able to get the next book in the series, right? And granted, I did not finish the Wheel of Time series. I made it up until I think Robert Jordan's last book. I can't remember what Winds of no, not Winds of Winter. That's a Game of Thrones reference. I'm sorry. Um, but now now we're on to the Great Hunt, which is season 2. It's really supposed to be focused around the hunt of the Horn of Valir, and the oh God, the Suldam, the Damani. I mean, it's such terrible acting all over the place. Like that whole set of characters, the bad guys that are infiltrating the towns and capturing women who can channel and bending them to their will and stuff. I mean, it's just god awful. And the weaves. Let's talk about the weaves. The weaves, like the whole one power. It is so. I get they have good special effects, but they couldn't come up with anything better. I don't know why they. I don't know what it is. It's so anticlimactic. It's so. I mean, God, like using the Force in Star Wars was better than this. I mean, not that you need to. I understand they're trying to be creative. Maybe they're trying to portray it. It's just not how you picture it in the book. Absolutely not. You pictured. I pictured less strands, less weaves, and maybe that is what they're trying to get at, like this whole weave of yarn or strings. But it's really poorly done. The way the time it takes to channel, the time it takes to what they don't do a good job of explaining anything in this show of what the difference is between the male and the female half of the one power is. They don't talk about the capabilities, the limitations. You have this just terrible explanation and poor representation of what it means to be stilled or shielded from the one power, cut off, or you know, like this last episode when Moraine. It was so rushed. When Lan asks Logain to what do you see when you look at Moraine, and he tells him it's a knot, it's tied off, whatever. And then they're in the middle of escaping the city because Lanfear comes to cause some chaos so they can get out, right? And they get to a place where they need to make a way gate. And first, this whole scene was terrible. And they're trying to like explain to Rand, okay, shit, we're here. Rand, you're gonna have to. You don't know how to use the one power because we've been terrible at teaching you. So, but you're just gonna have to figure it out. You're just gonna have to like break down this wall with your one power. And then it's like they have to know they're being chased by the Aes Sedai at this point, right? Or else that's a complete plot fail. Because, right? And they have no backup. It's just them, right? Lanfear's not even there yet. And then, and then, in the middle of this, like, hey, we need to get this wall down, whatever, what have you. It's like Lan's like, oh no, hey guys, he calls a timeout, like pause, huddle. No, there's no chaos going on outside. There's no people chasing us. Let's take this moment and have a heart to heart and like, Rand, what do you see when you look at Moraine? oh, you see the knot, right? Okay, so let's break it. You can't untie it, so let's just use your one power to untie it. And it's like this guy has unlimited power. He's the Dragon Reborn. He's like the most powerful character on the show. He doesn't know what he's doing, and you're just gonna ask him to do this. He could kill Moraine, right? But like, and especially in this moment, like, I don't remember if this is how it happened in the book, but it's like of all the moments to have this happen, it's like it was so rushed and poorly done, and it just left a bad taste in my mouth as a fan. And I mean, like, you gotta drink your juice, but I I have so many qualms with the show. Let's talk about the dress. Let's talk about that. Again, I keep going back to Game of Thrones because it's my best frame of reference. Again, Game of Thrones had such great either attention to detail or the setting. It felt more real. It felt more authentic. It felt more dark in a way. In sincerity, that the music was better. I mean, the music in the first season was okay, and they just completely abandoned the season for. I'm talking about Wheel of Time music now. The Game of Thrones music was great from the beginning. They carried that through to the end, right? The theme song, everybody knows that. Excited Sunday night, boom, we're excited to see the map. They go around the whatever. They're not doing that in Wheel of Time. They had something kind of original for the first season. They completely threw that out the window for the second season. No reason why. They have a terrible intro. Like, it would be, maybe they're trying really hard not to copy Game of Thrones, but like, they could have taken some cues from Game of Thrones. I think it would have been amazing if they had an intro like Game of Thrones with their own theme music that bounced around the map. Because again, you can't, these shows, like these two book series, it's hard to separate them. They have like they're written around the same time. They're very extensive. They're many volumes long. And now you're trying to recreate a TV show. You're trying to make Game of Thrones without making Game of Thrones. Like, everybody's been doing that since Game of Thrones, whether it's The Witcher or the Amazon or the Lord of the Rings on Amazon, whatever. I mean, a lot of shows have been trying really hard to recreate the magic that was Game of Thrones for like 5, maybe 6 seasons, right? I mean, at least 4 or 5. You have to say that. I mean, there was very little to critique about that show initially for the majority of its run. It was it. I mean, it was amazing. And I don't know if it was all the directors just bringing the books to life, because obviously when they had no material to go off of and they went on their own off-beaten path, they ruined the ending of the show. But is that what it is? Does it take like the director? Is it the directors that need to be, just staying more true to the material, to the books? I don't know. What happened with the Wheel of Time that made it so like cringy? It's so cringy. The acting is off so much of the time. I mean, just the dialogue between the characters, like this last episode with Rand and the leader of the Aes Sedai, Seanchan, and like in the flashbacks with Seanchan and Moraine, and just like, it's so cheesy. It is so, there's so much cheesiness in this entire show. Like, I keep thinking it's going to get better, and it doesn't. Like I said, I've been holding off on saying anything about this as a fan, but I can't anymore. It's like it's gotten so frustrating to watch as a fan. And I was so excited because, again, I was disappointed with season 1. I thought there were some promising moments, but I thought, all right, maybe they were rushed, maybe it was during COVID, maybe, what have you. Now they've had 2 years to really put together a better season 2. Maybe I thought that they would listen to criticisms and look at critiques and take feedback and really, dial it back or dial it down or dial it in, whatever, and really try to make a better version of this show the way that the books deserve. I mean, this is a great series, and it's too clean, it's too, the acting is off, the dress, the aesthetics, the costumes, it's so clean, it's so pure, it's so fake feeling. It doesn't feel like the books. I mean, look at the books. Just look at again, the illustration of the cover of the first book of the first season, whatever. It's it invokes a sense of realty, right? Like tattered clothing, dirty faces, bruises. I don't know, just soot and dirt and charcoal and I don't know, right? I mean, just the like kind of like the realism you felt with Game of Thrones, and some people thought it was too real, right? People were like, "Oh my God, it's so gory," and they're showing so much, but that's part of what made Game of Thrones Game of Thrones, and it's like Wheel of Time is doing none of that. They're like straying away from anything that could be even like potentially gory or whatever, and maybe that's the 13 and up rating, but they're really doing themselves a disservice because that isn't like the books are less graphic than Game of Thrones. Fair, but it's such a terrible representation of what this book series was or is or could have been portrayed on a screen. Because as a child when I read these books, and I grew up reading the Lord of the Rings and watching those movies as well, the cartoons and then the real life trilogy, and I also was a sci-fi fantasy person, whatever, Star Wars, raised on that kind of stuff. So um, the whole the whole idea that this book series would ever become a movie or a show was so far fetched to me. When I read the Game of Thrones and the A Song of Ice and Fire and the Wheel of Time series, when I read them basically at the same time, I always thought, man, these are such amazing shows, or I'm sorry, amazing books. I wish they would make this into a movie, but I know they never will because there's no way you can fit whatever 8, 10 books, and these are thick books. I was like, there's no way they'll never be able to fit this into a movie. A movie will never do it justice, right? And we're talking about the '90s and the early 2000s, okay? So there was no thought in my mind that there would ever be a way to bring something like this to life. And that all changed when we entered the age of streaming and long, you know, series, whatever, and Netflix, HBO, what have you. I mean, that all changed really with, I'd say, Game of Thrones, with being able to really do a book series justice with a long TV show that you could do a season per book, basically. So a very long movie, right? And that was awesome. I remember not even knowing that Game of Thrones was going to be a book series or a movie series, a TV show. Sorry, until leaving Walmart after the first season had already been out, and I saw that there was, the DVD set available. I was like, oh man, that's crazy, right? And we're talking about like, I don't know, 2012 or something like that. I don't remember, 2011, 12. Um, but I had been so excited when I heard about the Wheel of Time being brought to life. I thought if there's any remaining book series out there that would rival Game of Thrones, it's this one. And if anybody can do it, it's Amazon. Like I said, they did a great job with The Expanse. I hadn't yet been disappointed by the Lord of the Rings debacle, but I had hope after season one, and I've been nothing but continually disappointed with season two. The acting is off. The costumes are off. The people, the actor selection, the character that they've chosen for many roles is terrible. Um, the wokeness infusion is evident, and it's a disappointment to many people. I can probably speak for a lot of people, and it's nothing to do with politics. It's not accurate. It's not a fair representation of how these characters were portrayed or written or expected to be on screen. How the writing could be so terrible, with so much source material is really confusing to me. I mean, get some good actors, have them read the books. You're not making new scenes up. You're just recreating scenes that have already been written and well well written by a good author in the book, right? And you can't even just stick to those, right? You jump all over the place. You know, it's not a very cohesive feeling. Like just this last episode, they were like they jump cut a little too much, right? You don't get to finish a scene with characters. Like we jump from Son Chen and Rand, her shielding him, and then you think maybe he's going to break out of it or something, or show some potential, show something, show some incredible preview of what he's capable of, his strength, what have you, and nothing. There's been those scenes where they have that, and then they boom immediately jump to, I don't know, pairing with the Aiel. I will say that the Aiel are good. They do a good. They are kind of more authentic, dirty, rugged in the desert. You do get the sense of them. We haven't met really any male Aiel yet, and we don't. We're not we don't know much about their history. They're not doing a good job of that. It seems like they're trying to explain some of their culture and their language and stuff like that. But we know they're badass fighters, but we're not really sure how they're going to play into anything else in the series. We don't know what their purpose is. They haven't done a good job of explaining that. We just know Perrin's involved with that one Aiel, and they fight a lot, right? The Eye fight each other, or whatever. They have strange customs, kind of like, I don't know. You could say like the Dothraki in Game of Thrones. But yeah, those are just some initial thoughts. I've rambled for 30 minutes. I probably had some more thoughts that I wanted to get out, but I mean, just to kind of highlight again the overall disappointment with this series. I mean, the characters not feeling like an accurate representation of how they're written in the books. Um, the the acting is off, the writing is off, the speed of how they're trying to jump around and cover so much, but not really hit everything very well. Um, the special effects are terrible with the weaves and the one power. They're not doing a good job of bringing in the reader or the watcher to anything in this series. I mean, I would argue that by halfway or by the end of season one of Game of Thrones, most people were hooked, right? You were hooked. You were intrigued. You were excited. I mean, there was so much well well done about that show, and you almost lost me after season one of Wheel of Time, and now we're into season three, or I'm sorry, season two, and it's just another debacle. I mean, you could say, okay, maybe it's just a slower book, and we are building towards things, but they're already talking about the last battle and the Dark One, and they've already just set the stage for the entire thing. Like, there's no mystery, right? Like, at least with Game of Thrones, we didn't know. We didn't know about the White Walker leader. We didn't know who Jon Snow was yet. We just had like little hints dropped and little seeds planted, and it was fun to follow if you didn't know the book series. As a watcher of the show, you were always learning new stuff, putting puzzles together, figuring out who's who, who's related to who, what does this mean, blah blah blah. I mean, the whole thing with Moraine's younger sister, who looks older because of the way the Aes Sedai age, and then the brother, and then Leandrin collaborating with the Forsaken, and it's just terrible. And Egwene going through the the archways or whatever, that whole thing, like, we got nothing out of that. I mean, she became an accepted. She doesn't really know her power. Um, we don't really know what the Suldam and Damani thing is going on there. We just know that they capture Aes Sedai, or women who can channel, and make them slaves. It's just, there's so much frustration with this show. I can't begin to put it into words. And I've tried my best in a completely off the cuff, random, first time ever making a video for YouTube. Um, Sometimes I've had some friends in my life tell me I should have a YouTube channel. And I always say, like, for what? Like, what am I going to talk about? They're like, just talk about your life. I don't know. Just talk about random stuff. So I guess I'm trying it. I'm just going to upload a random video about something that I felt passionate and frustrated about. And, if anybody happens to watch this, let me know if you'd like another video maybe in the future. about anything. I have a lot of varied interests, so I'm happy to make commentary videos, if you will. There's a dime a dozen of those people on YouTube, so I'm not anything special. But if you want me to do like a episode by episode breakdown of Wheel of Time, I'd love to do that. I'd be happy to make some notes and talk about what was good and bad, and it's going to be mostly bad. I'm sorry. But to end this, why am I going to keep watching? Because it was one of my favorite book series, and I have to finish. I have to see it through. Maybe I'm holding on to a sliver of hope that something's going to change, but I don't think so, because if they haven't figured it out by now, I don't think they ever will. And I don't know how long this show is going to go on. I really don't. I didn't do any research before I made this video, but I'd be curious to know what kind of critical acclaim they're getting, right? What kind of reviews they're getting. Like, do they even pay attention? Do they care what people think about the show? I feel like they don't, because if they did, they might have looked at some of the criticisms of season 1, because there were certainly plenty, and they would have maybe tried to make some changes for season 2. But I really hope that they turn it around. But at this rate, like I said, again, just comparing it to Game of Thrones, I hate to keep doing that, but I have to. We have to. It is what it is, guys. By now, everybody was hooked. Either you liked Game of Thrones by this point, by like the same, season 2, whatever, towards the end, whatever, or you didn't, and you were done. You were checked out. I don't really know anybody who was like at this equal stage in Game of Thrones and was like, yeah, this is the shittiest show I've ever seen. I'm bored, and and there were a few, but like they had already probably checked out, right? But they weren't going to keep watching, is what I'm saying. And it wasn't for everybody, but it was for a lot of people. I don't know if the same can be said about the Wheel of Time. It is so far one of the biggest disappointments I've ever seen by Amazon, next to the Lord of the Rings debacle. Like I said, I had really high hopes for them with the Amazon. Well, I'm sorry, I had high hopes for Amazon with The Expanse, because I think that's the best show ever. I think it's called Game of Thrones in space for a reason. Everything that made Game of Thrones good about what was good about Game of Thrones is what's good about The Expanse. But I really hope they pull it together with Wheel of Time. I am not holding out any hope. I am going to finish the season, and I'd be happy to do an episode by episode breakdown if that's anything anybody wants to see, because I've been making mental notes this whole season about my continual disappointment, and I keep holding on, man. Every time there's a new episode released, I jump on it. I'm excited. I'm like, all right, maybe this is the one. Maybe they're gonna turn me around. Maybe something's gonna change. But every time I'm just like, God, like there's multiple. There's a handful of scenes in every freaking episode that just drive me nuts. So let me know what you guys think. Like, subscribe. I don't know. I'm just trying to grow this channel or build it or start it. I don't know. I don't know anything. I'm sure the audio sucks, and I'm sorry about that. I'm just using a desktop microphone. I'm trying to figure out how to even make videos at all. I'm just doing this because I've had friends and people tell me I should get my thoughts out there. So let me know what you think. Take care.